Inside the Grand Hall, Blood Eagle King listened to Mu Chen's clear voice directed at him. A shadow passed across his already sharp, chilling eyes. His fingers lightly tapped on the armrest of his chair, and though he remained silent, an invisible pressure began to spread, enveloping the room. Like a hungry eagle swooping down for its prey, it was fierce and lethal. A powerhouse with the strength of a fifth-grade supreme was indeed not something Mu Chen could contend with at this moment. However, Mu Chen only furrowed his brows slightly, his expression still calm. He had withstood even the pressure from Luo Heavenly God before, and compared to Luo Heavenly God, Blood Eagle King was clearly far inferior. Humph! Just as this oppressive aura filled the hall, a cold snort from Nine Nether echoed through the space, causing the pressure around Mu Chen to instantly dissipate. Behind Blood Eagle King, Wu Tian still wore a smiling face, though his grin was chilling. He hadn't expected that by sending Zhao Zhong to act, he would instead give Mu Chen a chance to demonstrate his abilities. From what he had shown earlier, Mu Chen indeed wasn't weaker than an ordinary commander. This brother has quite some skills. You've got me a bit eager. I wonder if you'd be willing to give me some pointers. Wu Tian smiled at Mu Chen, his expression friendly. He knew Blood Eagle King didn't want to return the golden pool quota to Nine Nether, and now that Mu Chen had defeated Zhao Zhong, if he didn't take action to suppress the other's sharpness, Nine Nether Palace might really take advantage of the situation. Upon hearing Wu Tian's words, many of the commanders in the hall slightly curled their lips. Among all the commanders in the great Luo Heaven domain, Wu Tian was among the top, and his behavior now seemed somewhat overbearing. I don't think we need a match between commanders. If you really think Nine Nether Palace isn't worthy, then let's have a king versus king battle. The loser will hand over all the quotas, Nine Nether said calmly, her expression serene. She understood Mu Chen's abilities. Although he had many techniques, he had yet to form the supreme Dharma body. While he might be able to hold his ground against a first-grade supreme, Wu Tian, who had reached the level of a second-grade supreme, would not be an opponent he could easily deal with. Her words were calm, but they made everyone in the hall feel a jolt in their hearts. A battle between commanders could still be considered a minor scuffle, but if it escalated to a king versus king fight, the consequences would be much more severe. Losing would significantly damage one's reputation in the great Luo Heaven domain. Thus, upon hearing Nine Nether's words, even Blood Eagle King's gaze subtly tightened. If Nine Nether was still at her old strength, he would have been happy to challenge her. However, now that she had returned after crossing her tribulation, her power was clearly not to be underestimated. Without fully understanding her strength and hidden cards, it wouldn't be wise to easily tear apart the facade and go to war with her. Cough. On the Lotus Throne, Heavenly Vulture Emperor finally coughed lightly, his voice old. As Nine Nether Palace is a king-level force in the great Luo Heaven domain, they naturally have the right to contest for the Golden Pool quota. In the past, Nine Nether was absent, and the quota was temporarily replaced. Now that Nine Nether has returned, the quota should be returned. Spirit Pupil Emperor smiled, saying nothing. Upon hearing this, Blood Eagle King glanced at Spirit Pupil Emperor, finding no objection from him, and nodded. Since Heavenly Vulture Emperor has spoken, the quota will be returned to Nine Nether Palace. As for the 1,000 drops of supreme spiritual liquid from before, no need to return it. Just leave it to Nine Nether Palace. After all, Nine Nether Palace is in dire need of supreme spiritual liquid now, isn't that right? At the end of his words, he gave Nine Nether a slight smile, though it carried a hint of mockery. Nine Nether returned the smile, but hers was filled with coldness. She then spoke with a smile. Since the quota issue has been resolved, let's discuss the cities that originally fell under Nine Nether Palace's jurisdiction. Upon hearing this, Blood Eagle King's expression immediately darkened. He didn't care too much about the Golden Pool quota. After all, even if Mu Chen participated in the contest, he didn't believe the latter could stand out among the many commanders and win one of the few quotas. Thus, he was willing to take a step back. However, judging by Nine Nether's tone, it seemed like she also wanted to reclaim control over the cities he had taken from her. This was something Blood Eagle King could not tolerate. Those cities contributed large amounts of supreme spiritual liquid every year, and the rapid development of Blood Eagle Hall relied heavily on that. Nine Nether, you just got back? aren't you being a bit too greedy? Blood Eagle King said coldly. I'm just taking back what belongs to us, the Nine Nether Palace. Nine Nether replied indifferently. Those cities were not taken by force. You've been away from the Nine Nether Palace for many years. How could those cities still be under your protection? If you couldn't protect others, naturally, others will seek a new ruler, Blood Eagle King sneered. Blood Eagle King, we are all clear-headed here. No need for all the pompous talk. Do you really think I don't know about your threats behind the scenes? Nine Nether countered sharply. Inside the hall, the two exchanged icy glances, neither backing down. The other kings remained silent, clearly showing they had no intention of getting involved in this dispute. Both of you, stop arguing. On the Lotus platform, the previously silent spirit pupil emperor suddenly smiled. His entirely black eyes swept over the group, and he spoke. Our great Luo heaven domain has its own rules. As long as everything is within the rules, it's fair game. As for the ownership of those cities, if anyone disagrees, feel free to take action. The rules are clear. Hearing this, Nine Nether's brow furrowed, while Blood Eagle King grinned with satisfaction. As kings within the great Luo heaven domain, they both knew the domain's rules. The great Luo heaven domain was vast, with countless cities. Most of them were directly controlled by the domain, while the remaining territories were governed by the Nine Kings. However, the Nine Kings were not on good terms, often clashing over territories. The great Luo heaven domain had never stopped such conflicts, but there was one rule. Kings themselves could not intervene directly. Their subordinates had to fight for control. Currently, the Nine Nether Palace was indeed the weakest of the 9 king-level forces, with only Chen recently qualified as its leader. In contrast, other king-level forces had powerful subordinates, making the Nine Nether Palace at a disadvantage if a conflict arose. Thus, Spirit Pupil Emperor's words, while seemingly neutral, effectively shut down Nine Nether's hope of reclaiming those cities. After all, the Nine Nether Palace could not rely on just Chen to compete with the many powerful subordinates of other forces. Nine Nether clenched her teeth, wanting to say more, but upon seeing Heavenly Vulture Emperor shake his head slightly, she reluctantly swallowed her words and coldly said, If that's the case, let's settle this through action. At any time, I'm ready. Blood Eagle King smiled, not taking Nine Nether's sharp words to heart. After all, the difference in strength between their subordinates was too great. Although Chen had defeated Zhao before, Zhao was only considered an average leader in Blood Eagle Hall. Seeing this, Chen didn't say anything further. He moved and appeared behind Nine Nether. Chen, you're amazing. Tang Ro leaned closer to Chen, smiling brightly. Her delicate face was filled with joy. No matter what, Chen had helped the Nine Nether Palace gain some face. Tang Bing also nodded slightly, showing Chen a rare smile. It's so hard to get a smile from Sister Tang Bing. Truly not easy. Chen couldn't help but laugh when he saw this. Uffed. Tang Ro giggled and covered her mouth, clearly catching the teasing tone in Chen's words. Tang Bing's face turned slightly red. Annoyed, she shot Chen a glare, then quickly returned to her usual cold expression. Once you really secure a spot in the great Luo Golden Pool, I'll smile all you want. Then I'll have to work hard. Chen seemed eager to try. Tang Bing snorted and turned her head, but her lips couldn't help but curl up slightly. The tension in her heart relaxed a little. When Nine Nether saw that there was no way to reclaim the lost cities in this Nine Kings meeting, she stopped speaking. Her face was calm, but she knew she had at least secured a spot for Chen. As for the things lost, there would be time to deal with them in the future. The meeting continued for another hour with discussions about other matters, but Nine Nether remained silent. Eventually, the meeting adjourned. After the meeting, Nine Nether stood up and led Chen and the others out of the hall. At the entrance of the hall, they bumped into Blood Eagle King and his group. Nine Nether, it's good for young people to have sharp edges. But remember, too much rigidity leads to breakage, said the Blood Eagle King with a faint smile. Blood Eagle King should also remember, being too greedy, beware of your stomach bursting. Nine Nether replied calmly. Haha, my stomach could eat up the entire Nine Nether Palace and still not explode. Blood Eagle King chuckled, then glanced at Chen beside Nine Nether. A cold gleam flashed in his eyes, but he didn't say anything more and turned to leave. Wu Tian and Chao Feng passed by them, and the former paused beside Mu Chen, flashing a full smile as he extended his hand, gently patting Mu Chen's shoulder. "Brother, if you're going to participate in the Great Luo Golden Pool contest, then I must remind you." He paused, and a sinister smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. "Be careful, or I might just beat you to death." He laughed heartily, patted Mu Chen's shoulder again, and left with an air of ease. Mu Chen watched Wu Tian's retreating figure and muttered to himself, "I really want to beat him to death." At the entrance of the hall, Nine Nether heard Mu Chen's muttering, and a smile appeared on her once cold face. "He is indeed quite noisy. Better if he's beaten to death." "I'll try my best," Mu Chen nodded. Behind them, Tang Bing and Tang Rou exchanged glances and then bitterly smiled. They really couldn't understand where Mu Chen's confidence came from. Wu Tian was certainly not someone like Zhao Zhong. He was among the top leaders in the Great Luo Heaven domain. If they really fought, they couldn't imagine what would happen to Mu Chen. This guy, he truly doesn't fear tigers because he's a young calf. "Let's go." Nine Nether smiled gracefully, and the icy demeanor she had inside the hall melted away. With a flick of her jade hand, she motioned to leave. "Nine Nether." Suddenly, a voice came from behind. Nine Nether paused, slightly turned her head, and saw Su Qing in green robes quickly approaching. His eyes were bright and filled with joy as he stared at her. "Oh, it's Su Qing. What's the matter?" Nine Nether raised her beautiful eyes and smiled, but there was a coldness in her tone, as if she was trying to distance herself. Although she and Su Qing were somewhat acquainted in the past, over the years, she had come to see Su Qing as nearly a stranger. Looking at Nine Nether's narrow and beautiful eyes, Su Qing was slightly taken aback. His usual composure vanished in an instant, and his heart began to race faster. Yet, those eyes grew brighter and hotter. "Welcome back," Su Qing finally said softly. "Thank you." Nine Nether gave a nod, neither cold nor warm, and without any intention of conversing further with Su Qing, she turned and left. This left Su Qing, who had mustered the courage to speak more, with a deflated expression. He shrugged self-deprecatingly, but the admiration in his gaze as he watched her slender figure didn't diminish in the slightest. "TSK, looks like your fate isn't much better than mine." A voice of schadenfreude came from behind Su Qing. He turned and saw Zhou Yu grinning at him. "At least I wasn't chased away by someone," Su Qing retorted. Zhou Yu's feelings for Tang Bing were well known. After all, this guy had been kicked out of Nine Nether Palace by Tang Bing, sword in hand. By that logic, we're somewhat of kindred spirits, Zhou Yu chuckled. Then, with a squint, he looked at the tall figure following Nine Nether and said softly, "I've inquired. The person following Nine Nether is called Mu Chen. It seems that Nine Nether intends to have him represent Nine Nether Palace in the Great Luo Golden Pool contest. What do you think?" It doesn't matter to us," Su Qing smiled. He knew that no matter how simple Mu Chen was, he would never be able to challenge his spot. He had absolute confidence in his own strength. As the top among the four great commanders, it wasn't something that could be claimed by mere words. "Yeah, this time there's some good drama to watch. I'm curious to see how far Mu Chen can go," Zhou Yu smiled. The two shared a grin before turning and leaving. "Seems like Su Qing really has some interest in you," Mu Chen said seriously as he approached Nine Nether, with several figures sweeping through the sky on their way back to Nine Nether Palace. "Shut up," Tang Bing and Tang Rou both smiled. "You've met Wu Tian and Chao Feng. What do you think? Are you confident? If you want to obtain a quota for the Great Luo Golden Pool, you must at least defeat one of them." Nine Nether's beautiful eyes turned toward Mu Chen, her expression serious. "It's hard to say right now." The young man pondered for a moment, a reassuring smile appearing on his handsome face. He gently clenched his long fingers together. "But in 2 months, I will win. In 2 months, he should be able to successfully cultivate the Great Sun Indestructible body. By then, with his Supreme Dharma body, he would have no fear of any opponent at the same level." Even though Wu Tian possessed second-grade supreme strength, Mu Chen would not be intimidated in the slightest. Tang Bing and Tang Rou looked at the confidence on the young man's face, both a little surprised. They didn't know him well enough to understand how he planned to make such great progress in just 2 months. After all, at the moment, he seemed quite far from reaching the level of Wu Tian and Chao Feng. But despite the doubts in their hearts, when they saw Nine Nether nod lightly, they no longer spoke. They trusted Nine Nether, and Nine Nether trusted Mu Chen, so they also believed in him. Perhaps he could really do it. Good luck. Tang Bing and Tang Ro exchanged a glance, both softly speaking to Mu Chen. Their nearly identical beautiful faces now showed encouragement and anticipation. This would be the first battle for Nine Nether after her return, so it was crucial. Looking at the encouragement and expectation in the eyes of the two beautiful girls, Mu Chen lifted his head, took a deep breath, and smiled slightly. It seemed that the great Luo Golden Pool quota was something he must secure. However, what excited him even more was that he could finally begin cultivating the great sun indestructible body he had longed for. That would be the starting point on his path to becoming an unparalleled powerhouse. Bloodhawk Hall. The Blood Eagle King sat with a gloomy face on his throne, his eyes slightly closed. The eerie killing intent that spread from him made the numerous Bloodhawk Hall experts in the hall too afraid to speak. It was clear to everyone that the Blood Eagle King was furious. My lord, recently, our operations to annex some of Nine Nether Palace's territories. Should we slow them down? One of the Bloodhawk Hall experts asked quietly. Slow down. The Blood Eagle King opened his eyes, casting a cold gaze. The expert who had spoken immediately felt a chill run down his spine. An unrealistic woman thinks she can make me, the king, afraid? The Blood Eagle King's voice was cold. Send orders to speed up contact with the various city lords under Nine Nether Palace. As long as they join my Bloodhawk Hall, I will offer them many benefits. If not, it means they are looking down on my Bloodhawk Hall, and one day, I will make them regret it. The Blood Eagle King waved his hand and sneered. Yes. The high-ranking members of Bloodhawk Hall quickly responded. The Blood Eagle King's gaze turned to Wu Tian and Xiao Feng. For this great Luo Golden Pool contest, I've secured a quota for both of you. I hope you won't disappoint me. Wu Tian and Xiao Feng both clasped their fists and nodded. Also, the Blood Eagle King's lips curled into a sinister smile. It seems Nine Nether has placed great importance on that kid named Mu Chen. Since she's so confident, you two should cripple him in the battle for the great Luo Golden Pool. Upon hearing this, Wu Tian and Xiao Feng exchanged glances, both of them showing cruel smiles. Exactly what we were planning. Nine Nether Palace, Cultivation Chamber. Mu Chen sat in still meditation. His face was calm, and there was not the slightest fluctuation of spiritual energy around him. He didn't begin cultivating right away, but sat in silence for nearly 2 hours. Once his state of mind reached true stillness, his half-closed eyes slowly opened. He formed hand seals, and a dark glow shot out from his body. It finally hovered in front of him, transforming into a mysterious black page. It was the page of immortality, which concealed the method for cultivating the great sun indestructible body. Mu Chen quietly gazed at it. This ancient black page contained secrets that had driven countless supreme experts mad with desire. The value of the eternal undying body was enough to make even a heavenly supreme lose their composure. After summoning the mysterious black page, Mu Chen's hand seals shifted once again. 3 light orbs shot out from his Xun'er bracelet, each containing terrifying fluctuations of spiritual energy that expanded rapidly. Faintly, it almost sounded like the crashing waves of water, a manifestation of the overwhelming spiritual energy that had reached a terrifying level. Inside these 3 orbs were the 3 rare cultivation materials Mu Chen had worked tirelessly to gather. The 9 Sun Spirit Fungus, the Void Solar Fruit, the Immortal Divine Leaf. Each of these materials was incredibly rare. Mu Chen didn't know how much effort he had expended to collect them, but fortunately, the heavens had favored his perseverance. Now, all 3 materials were finally in his hands. The once seemingly unreachable, great sun undying body could now truly begin its cultivation. Mu Chen lightly touched the page of immortality with his long fingers. As his finger made contact, a dark glow surged on the mysterious black paper, which then flowed out like a torrent of shadowy light, rushing into Mu Chen's body through his fingers. A vast and ancient flood of information exploded within his mind. The torrent caused his body to tremble slightly, but he forced himself to endure it, steadily absorbing the complex cultivation methods for the great sun undying body, contained within the information. This process lasted for several minutes before finally concluding. Mu Chen's eyes suddenly snapped open. His black pupils locked firmly onto the three precious materials before him. His gaze was serious. From the information he had just received, he understood that he only had one opportunity to cultivate the Great Sun undying body. This was not only because of the rarity of the materials, but also because, if he failed, his body would never be able to adapt to the Great Sun undying body again. Even if he managed to gather the materials once more, the cultivation would fail. The Great Sun undying body offered no second chances. If he failed, it would be lost forever. The harshness of this cultivation method made Mu Chen's heart tremble. However, this tremor was quickly suppressed as Mu Chen took a deep breath. His black eyes were no longer filled with hesitation. No matter how difficult it was to cultivate the Great Sun undying body, he would never give up, and he would definitely succeed, because he had promised that girl. With a sudden motion, Mu Chen formed a hand seal, his eyes fierce and determined. Let's begin. Mu Chen's heart was as calm as still water, and even the surrounding spiritual energy seemed to silently converge, like a bottomless, shadowy pool. However, as his mind settled, an enormous wave began to rise within his body's supreme sea. The roaring sound of waves echoed. Inside the vast supreme sea, purple-hued waves began to surge, accompanied by the crashing sound of water. A massive amount of spiritual energy was gathering within the supreme sea. To refine the supreme Dharma body required an immense and almost terrifying amount of spiritual energy, and now Mu Chen had to prepare for it. Amidst the churning supreme sea, a golden light slowly surfaced and then settled, floating amidst the waves. It was Mu Chen's divine soul, and at this moment, a serious expression was etched on his face. A breath of spiritual energy, mixed with purple flames, slowly exhaled from his divine soul's mouth. His eyes suddenly sharpened, and his hands swiftly formed a complex and peculiar seal. Boom! As soon as Mu Chen's hand seal was completed, a loud rumble echoed throughout the supreme sea. Giant columns of spiritual energy erupted from within the sea. Boom! Boom! The energy pillars shot up into the sky before abruptly diving downward, resembling giant dragons. The impact was so shocking that the entire supreme sea seemed to be shaken, its vast waves growing larger as a brilliant purple light spread throughout the sea. In the center of the collision, the violent spiritual energy caused the space to twist. Mu Chen's divine soul raised its head and gazed at the dazzling scene. His small hands once again formed a seal. Boom! The supreme sea trembled once more. Countless streams of spiritual energy surged into the sky like water serpents, all roaring towards the area bathed in purple light. The scene was awe-inspiring, like a great whale drawing in water. The tremendous spiritual energy continued to pour into that region, and as it did, the purple light grew more and more radiant. The first step in cultivating the Supreme Dharma Body is to condense the initial form of the Supreme Dharma Body using one's own spiritual energy. This step can only rely on one's own spiritual power. In the vast Supreme Sea, massive beams of spiritual energy light are constantly rising, accompanying the movements of Mu Chen's divine soul hand, soaring into the sky and eventually being fully infused into a massive light shadow. The once abundant spiritual energy in the Supreme Sea is clearly being consumed at an astonishing speed. However, for Mu Chen, whose cultivation foundation is quite solid, this step poses no significant threat. The spiritual energy within his Supreme Sea is entirely self-cultivated. Furthermore, with the integration of the undying fire, the quality of his spiritual energy far surpasses that of an ordinary Supreme. Thus, after this infusion continued for about 10 minutes, the turmoil within the Supreme Sea finally began to subside, and the sky above the Supreme Sea was filled with blinding purple light. Mu Chen's divine soul raised his head and gazed at the purple-lit sky. There, the sky suddenly began to stir, and a massive purple shadow, about 1,000 feet tall, slowly stood up, finally towering above the sky. A terrifying spiritual energy fluctuation rippled around it. The initial form of the Supreme Dharma Body had been formed. Mu Chen looked at the purple shadow and quietly let out a breath of relief. but quickly tensed again, for he knew that the true cultivation had only just begun. Nine Sun Spirit Fungus, transform. A low whisper echoed from within Mu Chen's heart. In the cultivation chamber, the Nine Sun Spirit Fungus hovering in front of Mu Chen suddenly trembled violently and transformed into a dazzling beam of light, shooting straight into Mu Chen's slightly parted mouth. Boom! Above the supreme sea, it seemed as if the sky was torn open and a blinding light descended from the heavens, like the sun itself arriving. Within the light, a swaying spirit fungus appeared, with 9 blazing suns seemingly rising above it. Mu Chen's divine soul extended a finger, pointing to the air. 9 suns as the body. Under his command, the 9 sun spirit fungus immediately fell straight down, landing on the purple shadow's head, and slowly slid down the top of its head. As the 9 sun spirit fungus entered the body of the shadow, it suddenly split apart, releasing 9 blazing suns, which then hovered at crucial points like the head, heart, and limbs of the giant shadow. Sizzle, sizzle. When the 9 blazing suns took their positions, they seemed to burn instantly. The terrifying heat began to spread, and the immense spiritual energy within the giant shadow was burned at an astonishing speed. The giant shadow's enormous form quickly began to shrink. At this rate, in just a few dozen breaths, the initial form of the supreme Dharma body that Mu Chen had painstakingly condensed would be completely consumed by the 9 blazing suns. And once the initial form of the supreme Dharma body was burned away, all of Mu Chen's previous efforts would be in vain. In the cultivation chamber, Mu Chen, whose eyes had been tightly shut, suddenly opened them. He flicked his fingers, and the Xun'er bracelet on his wrist trembled. Immediately, a torrent of energy surged out. As the torrent surged forth, a dense mist filled the chamber, created by the condensed spiritual energy. The torrent resembled a small stream, and within it, all the liquid was supreme spiritual liquid. This stream contained at least 10,000 drops of supreme spiritual liquid. Mu Chen had long known that cultivating the great sun indestructible body would require an immense amount of supreme spiritual liquid, so he had been working on unlocking the seal of the spirit gathering bowl with the help of 9 nether. As a result, he had obtained nearly 50,000 drops of supreme spiritual liquid. This was an incredibly large number, and Mu Chen could sense that this amount of spiritual liquid had likely already consumed most of the spiritual energy stored within the spirit gathering bowl. However, to successfully cultivate the great sun indestructible body, the price of 50,000 drops of supreme spiritual liquid was clearly worth it. Once the spiritual energy stream made of supreme spiritual liquid appeared, Mu Chen immediately sucked it into his mouth. His body trembled violently. Such terrifying spiritual energy was too dangerous to remain inside his body for any amount of time. It was immediately poured into the supreme sea, rushing into the initial form of the supreme Dharma body. Boom! Above the supreme sea, countless cracks appeared in the sky, and torrents of spiritual energy cascaded down, flooding into the supreme Dharma body. With such a massive amount of spiritual energy entering the scene, the shrinking speed of the supreme Dharma body's initial form was finally slowed down. A vast flow of spiritual energy was continuously burned by the 9 blazing suns. However, every time a bit of spiritual energy was burned, a wave of golden mist would rise, swirling up before being absorbed by the colossal form of the supreme Dharma body. As a result, the supreme Dharma body, which was entirely enveloped in purple light, began to show tiny golden spots across its enormous body. Under the heat of the 9 blazing suns, spiritual energy was consumed at an extraordinarily terrifying rate. In just half a day, the stream of spiritual energy, formed from 10,000 drops of supreme spiritual liquid, was completely burned up. The effects of this spiritual energy flow were evident. The initial form of the supreme Dharma body gradually brightened, and more golden spots appeared. Mu Chen's divine soul seal changed. The sky once again cracked open, and cracks began to appear, followed by torrents of spiritual energy pouring down from above, clearly signaling that he had resumed using the supreme spiritual liquid he had prepared. If the first step relied on the sheer power of his own spiritual energy, then this second step truly depended on the abundance of one's resources. The rate at which energy was consumed for cultivating the great sun indestructible body was startling even to Mu Chen. Had he not been fortunate enough to obtain the Spirit Gathering Bowl during the Spiritual Academy contest, which happened to contain a massive amount of ancient supreme spiritual liquid preserved by a long-lost sect. Even if he gathered the materials, he would have failed due to the inability to obtain enough supreme spiritual liquid. After all, a typical supreme Dharma body requires 1,000 or 2,000 drops of supreme spiritual liquid, which is enough to reach the top. But here, that amount would not even be enough to fill the gaps. Mu Chen quietly exhaled and began to concentrate. For the next step, he simply needed to keep feeding the supreme Dharma body's initial form with supreme spiritual liquid. He poured the liquid nonstop for nearly 8 days. During these 8 days, the spiritual energy never stopped flowing for even a moment. By now, 50,000 drops of supreme spiritual liquid had been completely exhausted. After the last drop of supreme spiritual liquid was used, even Mu Chen, with his level of composure, couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. He knew that if others found out he had used 50,000 drops of supreme spiritual liquid to cultivate the supreme Dharma body, they would likely be utterly shocked. But these 50,000 drops of supreme spiritual liquid clearly had an enormous effect. Within the supreme sea, Mu Chen's divine soul raised his head and looked up. In the sky, a massive light shadow stood tall, no longer purple but fully transformed into gold. Golden light flowed across every corner of its vast body. From afar, it resembled a golden Buddha, imposing and mysterious, with an invisible aura of pressure enveloping everything, creating an incredibly terrifying feeling. Mu Chen could clearly sense that within the golden light shadow, the 9 blazing suns were still burning fiercely, but they could no longer burn the supreme Dharma body. Because now, the supreme Dharma body had already taken shape. The second step of 9 suns as the body had finally succeeded. Mu Chen sighed in relief. After a moment, his body tensed once more, and his expression grew increasingly serious. He knew that the next step would be the most dangerous part of cultivating the great sun indestructible body. If he couldn't withstand it, all his efforts would be for nothing. In the cultivation chamber, Mu Chen opened his eyes and focused on the fruit in front of him, the void solar fruit. The terrifying spiritual energy contained in this fruit was even more domineering than the 9 sun spirit fungus. Mu Chen stared at it, and the next moment, his gaze became resolute. He grabbed the void solar fruit and placed it directly into his mouth, his black eyes filled with determination. Years of planning had led to this moment. He wasn't about to fail now. Great sun tempering body. Suddenly, the calm supreme sea erupted. The golden light shadow standing above the supreme sea rippled with energy, sending out waves of turbulence. A wild and uncontrollable force descended from the sky, enveloping the entire supreme sea. Mu Chen's divine soul, with a grave expression, looked up. Above the supreme sea, a colossal tear seemed to rip through the sky, and from this crack, blinding light shot out, spreading across the entire supreme sea. Boom! A terrifying pressure descended, and a massive golden sun appeared, tearing through the space and rushing into the supreme sea with an overwhelming force. This golden sun was clearly transformed from the void solar fruit. Golden flames wrapped around the golden sun, and the terrifying heat began to spread throughout the supreme sea, causing the spiritual energy within to evaporate. The power of the void solar fruit was evidently even more domineering than that of the 9 sun spirit fungus. Mu Chen gazed at this scene, his heart trembling. He then took a deep breath, suppressing the shock within, and quickly formed hand seals. His low voice resonated across the supreme sea. Great sun body tempering. Buzz. As Mu Chen's voice echoed, the golden sun slowly descended, eventually sinking into the crown of the golden giant figure. Boom. In an instant, the golden flames rushed into the golden giant figure. The surface of its gilded body began to melt, as if it were being liquefied. Mu Chen's face turned crimson as he felt the internal heat. The golden giant figure now felt like a furnace, with golden flames wildly surging, and the ferocious power climbing relentlessly, as if ready to shatter the golden giant figure. Mu Chen's gaze grew heavy. If the 9-sun spirit fungus had helped to strengthen and solidify the foundation of this supreme Dharma body, then the void solar fruit would test its durability. If successful, the supreme Dharma body would be completely formed, but if it failed, the golden sun would utterly destroy the unqualified supreme Dharma body. Sizzle, sizzle. As the golden sun's flames grew brighter, the golden liquid on the supreme Dharma body's surface flowed faster. The massive figure of the supreme Dharma body also began to shrink quietly. Mu Chen's expression grew increasingly serious. The golden flames coming from the sun were growing more and more violent, and their intensity was still rising. At this rate, the supreme Dharma body would definitely not be able to withstand it. However, at this moment, Mu Chen had no choice but to press on. If he failed, he would forever be disconnected from the great sun undying body, a result he could never accept. He gritted his teeth and stared intently at the supreme Dharma body, which was shedding golden liquid. Time passed quickly. Half a day soon went by. Sizzle. The golden liquid continued to pour off the surface of the supreme Dharma body like a stream. The once towering figure of the supreme Dharma body had now shrunk several times. The shape had become twisted, as though it had been scorched by the extreme heat. Tiny golden flames leaked from the pores of the supreme Dharma body, swirling around its surface. Mu Chen's gaze was fixed on the spot between the brows of the supreme Dharma body. There, a golden sun had turned into a fireball, with the golden flames writhing like snakes. The golden sun had become so bright that it was impossible to look directly at it. The violent fluctuations continued to rise. Mu Chen's face began to twist, his eyes bloodshot, and his palms trembled slightly. He stared at the deformed supreme Dharma body, his face pale. He knew that the supreme Dharma body he had forged could no longer withstand the scorching heat from the golden sun. The power was too violent. It's about to explode. Mu Chen's heart raced as the golden light at the supreme Dharma body's brow grew brighter. The violent fluctuations indicated that the supreme Dharma body had reached its breaking point. The golden sun, like a heart, pulsed quietly, its light flickering. In a split second, its light suddenly solidified, and then the golden light erupted with a frenzy. Sizzle. Countless golden light pillars shot violently from within the supreme Dharma body. The previously indestructible supreme Dharma body suddenly exploded. In the cultivation chamber, the immortal divine leaf, which had been quietly waiting, suddenly shot straight into Mu Chen's brow. At the same time, a small beam of light cut through the sky above the supreme sea, eventually piercing into the exploding supreme Dharma body. Boom! A terrifying golden shockwave erupted, sweeping across the supreme sea and creating towering waves. The space twisted violently, as if even the supreme sea itself was about to burst apart. Mu Chen's divine soul dove deep into the supreme sea to avoid being caught in the horrific shockwave. The chaos raged on for a long time before it gradually weakened. Mu Chen's divine soul surged from the depths of the supreme sea, and his gaze immediately turned toward the area above, now bathed in golden light. The massive golden shadow there had long since vanished, clearly obliterated by the previous shockwave. Had it failed? Mu Chen stared at the area, then quietly sat down. He pressed his hands together and began to silently recite the cultivation mantra of the great sun indestructible body, which flowed through his heart like a stream. My heart is like the great sun, brilliant and indestructible. The mantra rang in Mu Chen's heart like the chime of a bell. Faintly, it seemed as though he had gained some insight. He formed a seal with his hands and whispered, "Indestructible protection." The golden light in that area suddenly rippled. Amidst the golden glow, an ancient withered leaf quietly floated. It then shattered into tiny light points, which scattered and spread out. These light points seemed to possess a magical regenerative power. As they fluctuated, vast waves of golden light gathered, and within this gathering, a colossal golden figure slowly began to take shape. In just a few moments, a supreme Dharma body formed within the golden light. This newly refined supreme Dharma body glowed even more brilliantly than before. Its gilded body appeared to be the most indestructible thing in the world. Moreover, dark purple patterns could be seen on the surface of the golden supreme Dharma body, the patterns ancient and grand, resembling the images of blazing suns rising. It was as if countless suns were burning in the sky. The supreme Dharma body sat silently in the air, neither speaking nor moving. As the golden light swirled around it, an indescribable, ancient, and overwhelming aura spread, causing Mu Chen's heart to shake with awe. Unbroken, no establishment. Does breaking lead to establishment? Mu Chen murmured. The supreme Dharma body before him was undoubtedly far more perfect than the one he had previously condensed. Its entire form was flawless, with not a single imperfection to be found. Clearly, the true Great Sun indestructible body required the previous destruction before it could be perfected and strengthened through the power of the immortal divine leaf. This is... Mu Chen looked up, his eyes filled with shock. The Great Sun indestructible body. The golden light gradually dissipated, and the massive golden figure became fully visible. The face of the supreme Dharma body was identical to Mu Chen's, but from a distance, it looked like a golden Buddha, capable of suppressing the heavens and the earth. Moreover, behind this supreme Dharma body's head, a colossal golden blazing sun floated, surrounded by golden flames that quietly surged, mysterious and awe-inspiring. The Great Sun indestructible body had finally succeeded. Uncontainable joy surged in Mu Chen's eyes. After all the hardships, he had finally succeeded in cultivating the Great Sun indestructible body. This moment, he had been waiting for many years. Mu Chen took a deep breath, and his divine soul moved. It appeared atop the Great Sun indestructible body's crown and slowly sank into it. As the divine soul merged, the supreme Dharma body's eyes suddenly opened, golden light pouring out, filled with endless majesty and mystery. In the cultivation chamber, Mu Chen's tightly shut eyes suddenly snapped open. He shot up, and golden light erupted from his body, forming a massive golden figure. Boom! The cultivation chamber trembled violently. The golden supreme Dharma body pressed against the ceiling, causing it to crack open, and with a loud crash, the chamber collapsed. Outside the cultivation chamber, on a stone platform, Nether, who had been meditating, suddenly opened her eyes. She looked up sharply at the cultivation chamber, where golden light surged, and a powerful spiritual energy fluctuation shot into the sky. Juyo's heart stirred, and she immediately appeared in the sky. With a gesture of her jade hand, a massive spiritual energy barrier descended, enveloping an area spanning thousands of yards. As the barrier covered the space, a gigantic golden Dharma body, towering 1,000 feet high, broke through from the cultivation chamber and stood tall between heaven and earth. Juyo lifted her beautiful eyes and gazed at the golden Dharma body, which resembled a golden Buddha. A golden blazing sun hovered behind its head, and a look of shock involuntarily appeared on her delicate face. She knew that Mu Chen's cultivated supreme Dharma body was extraordinary, but she hadn't expected it to be so grand and magnificent. Is this the Great Sun undying body?